Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. Amy Purdy had always been a lively, energetic young woman who loved her freedom. She enjoyed exploring nature, seeing new places, and especially snowboarding. Feeling the wind on her face as she glided down snow-covered mountains had become a passion for her. She even dreamed of becoming a professional snowboarder one day. Known among her friends for her positive energy, Amy was someone who truly lived in the moment. However, life had a completely different plan for her. At the age of 19, she had no idea that an ordinary day would change her life forever. She woke up feeling tired with a mild headache and slight fatigue, but didn't think much of it. However, as the hours passed, her condition worsened. Her fatigue turned into severe muscle pain and her headache became unbearable. Her body was shutting down. When her mother rushed her to the hospital, doctors acted quickly. After a series of tests, she received a terrifying diagnosis: meningococcal meningitis. This disease could be fatal, and time was of the essence. Doctors explained that the infection had spread to her bloodstream, endangering her organs, and that she was in septic shock. They did everything they could to save her, but her body was losing the battle against the infection. As the illness progressed, Amy developed serious complications. Her blood circulation was failing, causing gangrene to form in her feet and legs. Doctors informed Amy and her family that they faced a difficult decision. In order to save her life, they had to amputate both of her legs below the knee. For a young woman, this was devastating news. How could she continue her greatest passion, snowboarding, without legs? The day of the surgery arrived, and Amy was filled with fear. As she was given anesthesia and closed her eyes, she knew she was saying goodbye to her old life. When she woke up, nothing would ever be the same again. She had lost her legs, but she was still alive. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but this was not the end of her story. It was a new beginning. When Amy woke up from surgery, the silence in the hospital room felt overwhelming. At first, she struggled to understand where she was. As she opened her eyes and stared blankly at the hospital ceiling, she tried to feel her legs, but there was nothing. She took a deep breath, lifted her head, and looked under the blanket. That was when reality hit her. Her legs were gone from the knees down. At that moment, it felt as if her whole world had collapsed. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She couldn't even fully grasp her emotions. She felt an emptiness inside, as if an enormous wall had been built in front of her. Until that day, she had been someone who cherished her freedom. Gliding over endless white slopes on her snowboard had been her greatest joy. But now, that joy felt impossibly far away. Will I ever walk again? What will happen to my dreams? She thought. The first days in the hospital were nothing short of a nightmare. Without her legs, even the simplest movements became a challenge. Getting out of bed, sitting in a chair, or making the smallest gestures required tremendous effort. Her body was weak, her immune system was exhausted, and she was constantly in pain. More than anything, she felt emotionally shattered. Family members and friends visited her, trying to offer support, but seeing the sadness in their eyes only made Amy feel worse. Everyone around her had always seen her as a strong person, but at that moment, she didn't feel strong at all. At one point, she began to lose hope. Her future was uncertain, and she had no idea how she would continue her life without legs. However, as time passed, the fighting spirit within her slowly began to emerge. One day, as she sat in her hospital room, she had a thought. I've always loved pushing my limits. Why should I give up now? This realization sparked something inside her. Doctors had told her that she could walk again with prosthetic legs, but it wouldn't be easy. Still, she had to try. When she first put on her prosthetic legs, walking felt impossible. The prosthetics were stiff, unsteady, and didn't move naturally. As she attempted her first steps, she almost immediately fell. Even when she managed to stand, she became exhausted after just a few steps. Before losing her legs, walking had been something she did without thinking. But now she had to relearn everything. just like a newborn taking their very first steps. Every day, Amy went to physical therapy. She worked for hours to strengthen her muscles, improve her balance, and get used to the prosthetics. It was exhausting and painful. She often fell, and sometimes the pain made it impossible for her to keep going. But she never stopped. Giving up was not an option for her. Days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. Slowly, she got used to walking with her prosthetics. At first, she could only cover short distances, but over time, she was able to stay on her feet for longer periods. Doctors and physical therapists were amazed at her rapid progress. Amy had lost her legs, but she had no intention of losing her dreams. However, walking wasn't enough. The real question was whether she could return to snowboarding. Her passion was still there, but she didn't know if it would be possible to snowboard with prosthetics. But one thing was clear: she would never know unless she tried. That was the moment when Amy Purdy's true battle against life began. After months of physical therapy and exhausting attempts, Amy had finally started to walk comfortably with her prosthetic legs. At first, every step was carefully taken, and she exerted great effort to maintain her balance. But over time, she learned to use the prosthetics as if they were part of her body. She could walk now, and even began to try running short distances. But the most important thing for her was to return to her greatest passion: snowboarding. Since the day she lost her legs, her biggest fear had been the thought of never snowboarding again. The freedom she felt while gliding down the slopes, the wind on her face, and the thrill of speed. She wanted to experience all of that again. But there was a problem. Her prosthetic legs were not suitable for snowboarding. Standard prosthetics were designed for walking. They were stiff, not flexible, and couldn't adjust to the movements needed on the snow, making it difficult to maintain balance. When Amy tried snowboarding with her prosthetics for the first time, she realized that it was nearly impossible. Trying to ride with stiff prosthetics that didn't allow ankle movement was like trying to walk on ice with flat-soled shoes. She kept falling and couldn't maintain her balance, but she didn't want to give up. If her current prosthetics weren't working, she needed to find the right ones for her. Amy began researching prosthetic technology. She learned which materials were more flexible and durable, and how prosthetics for professional athletes were designed. She spent hours online, reading medical papers and contacting engineers working on sports prosthetics. Her determination led her to search for a new solution. Eventually, the idea of developing flexible and lightweight prosthetics suitable for snowboarding came to her. But this would require a much more specialized design than standard prosthetics. The ankle needed to be able to move, the load on the knee had to be distributed evenly, and the prosthetics needed to absorb the shocks from the snow. She realized that she would have to design her own prosthetics. Amy began the process of creating prosthetics specifically suited to her needs by consulting with engineers and prosthetists. She tried many different models. Some were too stiff, others were unstable, and some weren't durable enough. After working on one design for days, trying it on the mountain to see if it worked, she was often met with disappointment. However, each failure taught her something new. In her first attempts, the prosthetics were too heavy, limiting her mobility. She then tried a new design using lighter materials, but this time she realized they weren't durable enough. She fell over and over again but kept trying. Each failed attempt brought her closer to the right solution. Finally, she succeeded in developing a prosthetic specifically designed for snowboarding. This prosthetic had a flexible ankle that allowed movement and was adjusted to fit Amy's body perfectly. Now she could step onto her snowboard, maintain her balance, and control her movements more easily. One day, Amy finally felt ready to snowboard again with her new prosthetics. She went to the snow-covered mountains, her heart racing with excitement. The moment she had been waiting for had finally arrived. She stepped onto the snowboard, took a deep breath, and let herself slide down the slope. The first few seconds felt unfamiliar. She needed to adjust to her new prosthetics. However, after a few tries, her body began to recall the rhythm of snowboarding. Even if she fell, she got up and tried again. When she regained her balance, she felt the wind hit her face. At that moment, she realized that her life was truly beginning again. Amy Purdy had lost her legs, but she hadn't lost her dreams. By returning to snowboarding, she not only surpassed her own limits, but also proved to the world that with determination and perseverance, any obstacle can be overcome. But this was just the beginning. She had much bigger goals ahead. Now she didn't just want to be an ordinary snowboarder. She wanted to compete in the Paralympic Games one day. And for that, she was ready to give everything. Amy Purdy was finally ready to step onto her snowboard with the specially designed prosthetics. Standing on the top of the mountain, surrounded by white snow, she couldn't contain the excitement inside her. This was the place where she had been happiest since her childhood. Snowboarding, feeling the wind, being free while accelerating. She wanted to experience all of that again. However, nothing was the same since she had lost her legs. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and imagined how she used to snowboard. Her muscle memory was still there, but her body was completely different. Her new prosthetics were strong and flexible, but she had to learn how to use them. She stepped onto the snowboard and struggled to maintain her balance. From the very first moment, she realized how difficult it would be. Amy turned her snowboard down the slope and began to slide. But within just a few seconds, she lost control and found herself falling into the snow. Maintaining balance felt almost impossible. The prosthetic legs didn't seem to fit her body perfectly. She tried to get up, but even that was a struggle because she had sunk into the snow. After her first fall, she didn't lose hope. She got back up and tried again. But she fell again. And again. With each fall, she became a little more frustrated and tired. But the fighting spirit inside her told her not to give up. If she stopped here, if she gave up, then she would truly lose. She got back up again. She spread her arms to help with balance and tried to bend her knees. But since the prosthetics didn't bend like natural legs, her movements were much stiffer and more mechanical. Her old techniques weren't working. She had to learn a new method. For days, she kept practicing. She started with small movements. First, she learned to glide in a straight line. Then, little by little, she tried making turns. Sometimes, because the prosthetics didn't fit perfectly, her falls were harder. But each time she fell, she got up again. Every day, she got to know her body better. She learned the limits of her prosthetics, which movements were easier, and which ones required more practice. She experimented to discover how to use her arms for balance and how to distribute her weight. One day, after much practice, her body and prosthetics finally began to move in perfect harmony. She could stay balanced on the snowboard, gain speed, and change direction with control. When she felt the wind hit her face, her eyes filled with tears. In that moment, she truly felt reborn. As she glided down the mountain, she remembered the day when she had lost her legs in the hospital bed a few years ago. Back then, she had thought her life was over. But now, here she was, snowboarding on the snow, realizing that this was, in fact, a new beginning. Amy was no longer just a snowboarder. She was someone who had transcended her limits and made the impossible possible. But she still had much to do. Now her goal wasn't just to snowboard, it was to be the best. And she would continue working for that. From that day on, she increased her training. She learned new techniques, developed stronger prosthetics, and made herself stronger every day. She dreamed of one day competing in the Paralympic Games. And now she knew that it was no longer just a dream. This was just the beginning for her. When Amy Purdy succeeded in snowboarding with her prosthetics, she knew that this wouldn't be enough for her. Now she didn't just want to snowboard as a hobby, she wanted to compete. But returning to the world of competition wasn't just a physical challenge. It was also a mental battle. She knew that if she wanted to compete on equal terms with her rivals, she would have to work much harder. She increased her training, spending hours snowboarding every day. She tried different techniques, got to know her body better, and pushed the limits of her prosthetics. When she finally decided to enter her first national competition, she was filled with excitement. This would be her first major test since losing her legs. On the day of the race, as she stood on the starting line in the snow, she held her breath. Her heart was pounding. Her competitors were strong. They had been doing this sport for years. But Amy had made it this far, and she was determined to do her best. When the race began, she focused all her attention on the track. She struggled to maintain her balance during the first few turns, but soon she took control of her snowboard. As snowflakes flew through the air, she gained speed, and her muscle memory kicked in as she made the turns. By the end of the race, she achieved a better result than expected. She didn't make it to the top 3, but this was just the beginning. She knew that if she worked harder, she could improve. As she gained more experience in national competitions, her performance continued to improve. She was getting better results with each race, and she could see the rewards of her hard work. Her determination and perseverance began to attract attention. Soon, she was invited to international competitions. Now she would snowboard on the same tracks as the world's best athletes. At this point, she needed to prove herself not only physically, but also mentally against her competitors. Competing internationally was a huge pressure. However, she had learned a lesson from every challenge she had faced, and she had prepared her mind for this battle. When she won her first major international race, she couldn't control her emotions. Standing on the podium, she remembered the despair she felt a few years ago when she lost her legs in the hospital bed. But now, she was showing the world what determination and belief could accomplish. One of Amy's biggest goals was to compete in the Paralympic Games. She worked even harder for that. To push herself mentally and physically to the highest level, she doubled her training efforts. Finally, the moment arrived. When she qualified for the Paralympic Games, it was a huge victory not only for her, but for all athletes with disabilities. On race day, the whole world was watching her struggle. This wasn't just a race. It was the culmination of a lifelong battle, the pinnacle of years of effort. When the race began, Amy put all her energy into the track. Her competitors were strong, but she knew that determination was more important than anything else. Even when she lost her balance in the toughest parts of the track, she never gave up. As she neared the finish line, her whole body was exhausted, but she felt an incredible strength inside. And when she crossed that line, she realized she had achieved the greatest success of her life. She had won a Paralympic medal. Amy Purdy's achievements echoed around the world, not only as an athlete but also as an inspiration. As people heard her story, they saw that overcoming obstacles was possible. She didn't just surpass her own limits. She gave courage to millions of people to follow their dreams. She was now not only an athlete, but also a speaker, a source of motivation, and a symbol. Her story proved that there was no such thing as impossible. No matter how big the obstacles, the strength of the human spirit was always greater. And for Amy, this was just the beginning, because she would continue to push the boundaries and chase her dreams. Amy Purdy had achieved great success in the sports world by winning a Paralympic medal. But her story didn't stop with sports. Drawing inspiration from her experiences, Amy dedicated her life to giving hope to others. By sharing her journey, she instilled courage in people and showed them that nothing was impossible. After winning her medal, Amy began to stand out not only as an athlete but also as a speaker. Her story became a major source of inspiration, not only in the sports community, but for people facing challenges in various areas of life. She attended conferences and events around the world. On big stages in front of thousands of people, she shared the toughest moments of her life, the fear, hopelessness, and the process of getting back on her feet after losing her legs at the age of 19. But she also shared the strength and new perspective this process had given her. One of Amy's greatest messages was, "Obstacles don't stop you. They just help you rediscover how to move forward." She showed people that the challenges they face aren't an end, but a new beginning. During her speeches, she encouraged everyone to discover the potential within themselves and pursue their dreams, drawing from her own experiences. Amy's inspiring story needed to reach a wider audience, so she compiled the process she went through and the life-changing experiences she had into a book. In On My Own 2 Feet, she shared the struggles she faced after losing her legs, her journey back to snowboarding, and the path to winning a Paralympic medal. The book quickly gained great attention. People were moved by Amy's determination and perseverance, and they started thinking about how they could overcome their own challenges in life. The book served as a guide not only for individuals facing physical disabilities, but also for anyone encountering obstacles in any area of life. Amy didn't just share her own story. She also wanted to take concrete steps to improve the lives of people with physical disabilities. Her experiences in snowboarding had shown her just how important prosthetics were. Realizing that standard prosthetics were not functional enough for athletes, she decided to develop prosthetics that would meet her specific needs. To achieve this, she collaborated with engineers who specialized in prosthetic design to create more flexible, durable, and sports-friendly prosthetics. By testing her own prosthetics, she identified shortcomings and improved them further. Eventually, she contributed to the development of innovative prosthetic designs that not only helped her but also benefited athletes and disabled individuals worldwide. Thanks to the prosthetics she helped create, many people were able to live more active lives. There were now more options for individuals with disabilities who wanted to engage in sports, and Amy's contributions were a significant part of that transformation. Amy was determined to seize every opportunity life presented. This led her to take on a new challenge, participating in Dancing with the Stars. This show was one of the most popular dance programs in the world, with contestants paired with professional dancers to perform various dance styles. Amy surprised many who thought dancing with prosthetics was impossible. By flawlessly performing challenging choreographies like salsa, waltz, and tango, she proved that dancing with prosthetics was indeed possible. Her performances were widely admired, and she advanced to the finale of the competition. The passion and energy she displayed while dancing showed that she could be an inspiration not only in the world of sports, but also in the arts. Amy Purdy wasn't just an athlete who overcame physical boundaries. She became an inspiration for millions of people with her determination, perseverance, and outlook on life. Her story proved one thing: nothing in life is impossible. No matter how big the obstacles, the strength of the human spirit is even greater. Despite losing her legs, she never gave up on her dreams. She learned to snowboard, participated in competitions, won medals, wrote books, contributed to prosthetic technology, and inspired millions of people around the world. Today, Amy continues her life by giving speeches on stages, writing books, and working to improve the living conditions of disabled individuals. Her story has gone down in history as an example showing that everyone can surpass their own limits. And as Amy says, chase your dreams because nothing is impossible.